Hey everyone, welcome back to the How Strong series. We're going back to Kanto to discuss a fan favorite, Arcanine. This was decided by suggestions in the comment section, and from the top 3 from there, we took to a community poll. And the result was Arcanine. So if you have a Pokemon you'd like to see covered in a future episode, comment it down below, and whenever top 3 win, we will take them to another community poll, and from there will be one more final battle. As always, be sure to comment down below how you think this week's Pokemon will do, and leave a like to show your support. If we can hit 2,000 likes on this video, that would help this series out a lot. Anyways, with all that being said, let's just see how strong Arcanine really is. Starting off with Red and Blue, we have Growlithe as a possible Pokemon in Pokemon Red on Route 7 and 8, as well as the Pokemon Mansion. You'll have to rely on Ember for your stab of choice for fights such as Erica. However, this at least will be useful for her if nothing else. You may be able to utilize this against Sabrina's Venomoth if anything else, but you really won't find much use outside of this for Arcanine in the main story. You'll get a Firestone from Celadon, however you have the option to wait until the Elite Four, since you'll have the option to wait until Flamethrower at level 50. Sadly, you honestly won't really use Arcanine for the rest of the game at this point. Even Lorelei, who is an Ice-type user, has no Pokemon that you'd really want to use Arcanine against. I can't really see anything besides Erica in these games you'd really want to utilize Arcanine for, but that's mostly due to a horrible move pool as of right now. In Gold and Silver, you can find Growlithe before Ecruteak City. You now have a better fire attack at level 34 than Ember, which is Flame Wheel. While this is helpful to hold off until level 50 at least, you really only want to get use out of this against Jasmine's team. You should be able to have fun with Growlithe for the Jasmine fight. Arcanine being a fire type has a severe disadvantage against this Elite Four as well. However, at least there is a member you'll actually have a decent matchup against. You can use Arcanine to great success against Koga's team, seeing as most of it is actually bug types this time around. Because Fire Blast is locked behind the game corner for 5,000 coins, you'll either be using a Growlithe at this point, or taking your losses and ignoring Flamethrower as a move. Moving on to Kanto, we have a similar issues to the original games, where fire isn't really that strong against most gym leaders. Erica, thankfully, is still a strong matchup for Arcanine. And if you were patient with waiting for Flamethrower, this should only be that much easier. Other than Erica, however, you actually won't give that many strong battles for Arcanine. Arcanine definitely has an issue of having been given a terrible level up moveset. And unlike Nidoking, this can't really be accommodated with TMs, as you're getting Fire or Normal, unless you opt for Toxic or Rock Smash, which are only going to go so far. Yet again, Arcanine is definitely not worth using in these games. Going to Hoenn, Growlithe is unavailable in the main games, so we'll need to go with the trade for this set. This shouldn't really matter though, as Growlithe has a very big lack of viable matchups in these games. You have 2 battles that I'd utilize Growlithe for, being Watson and Winona. Watson's an electric leader, however he uses a Magnemite and Magneton on his roster. You'll be relying on Ember here. However, it honestly won't matter that much in my opinion, as you'll be able to do a fair bit of damage anyway. You'll luckily have access to Flame Wheel by the time you battle Winona, who uses a Skarmory you can 1v1. You can actually use a Firestone to obtain Arcanine by this point if you get it from Fiery Path. However, this may not be that bad. You'll be able to buy Fire Blast and Lilycove, which means you actually can benefit from using a Firestone before this fight. Moving on to the Elite Four, you have a couple good matchups here. Besides his Sharpedo, Sydney's actually a strong battle. Seeing as Sydney uses a Cacturne and Shiftry, you can easily Fire Blast these for a quick KO. You'll also be able to use Arcanine on Glacier's Glalie. However, you have to worry about her Celio and Walrein, as these will definitely prove problematic for you. Finally, if you're not playing Emerald, you'll have a strong matchup against Steven's team. You'll have to worry about a few Pokemon such as Claydol or Aggron, however Fire Blast should do a strong dent to most of these Pokemon. I don't think Arcanine is the worst option in these games, however I can't see a strong reason to choose Arcanine over Blaziken if you really want a Fire type in these games. One more thing I forgot to mention is you can actually get the Flamethrower TM from the Mauville Game Corner for 4,000 coins. So if you like this more than Fire Blast, that's probably more up your alley. Your TMs definitely improve for Fire Red and Leaf Green. However, it doesn't really change any matchups for Arcanine. So with that in mind, let's move on to Generation 4. Diamond and Pearl, we have to migrate over another Growlithe, but that's more worthwhile for this region due to early game opponents that Growlithe can handle. You'll use Growlithe first against Gardenia, which you'll actually have Flame Wheel for. This is very useful actually, seeing as these games have the physical special split, which favors Growlithe and Arcanine a bit. Flame Wheel should destroy all of Gardenia's team, even with just a Growlithe, so I wouldn't worry too much here. Once you've obtained Surf, go obtain a Firestone from Fuego Ironworks, then make your way to Byron. Byron's team should be a really big pushover, as well as Candace's team. Both teams pretty much automatically lose to Arcanine, seeing as the only super effective attack Byron has is Ancient Power from Bastiodon, whereas Candace's team has no strong option for Arcanine. Sadly, the Elite Four is a lot less promising for Arcanine. If you got Flash Fire, you'll have 2 battles you can actually have an impact in, but otherwise, it's just Aaron's team. Aaron's team, either way, is a Bug-type team, so you'll destroy this pretty easily with whatever your fire attack of choice is. If you have Flash Fire, you can potentially beat Flint's team. However, keep in mind, he doesn't actually use all fire types in Diamond and Pearl, despite being a fire opponent. Arcanine can potentially utilize moves such as Crunch and Dig to get past Flint's team, just beware of Infernape as it has Earthquake, and can potentially beat you 1v1. Overall, similar to Hoenn, I'd recommend going with the Fire starter in these games if you're going with the Fire type at all. However, this mostly matters for Rourke and Sinnoh, unlike Hoenn, where there are multiple battles you'd benefit from having a fighting type. Growlithe, similarly to Fire Red and Leaf Green, doesn't really change much in Heartgold and Soul Silver, so we'll be moving on to Black and White. Growlithe isn't natively available here, so we'll be obtaining it from an egg as usual. The first thing we need to do with Growlithe, though, comes before we can even trade, which is choosing our starter. We need to get the Silent matchup, so we will be choosing Oshawott for our starter. With this starter choice, we actually have 3 strong matchups in these games for gym leaders, which is fairly strong. Silent's team should be pretty easily beaten, even with just using Ember. From here, we'll move on to Berg's team, which is a bit more difficult in comparison due to Dwebble. But thankfully, its best way of damaging us comes from Smackdown. We'll have Flame Wheel by now, and you can potentially even obtain your Firestone in Castelia City as well. I would advise waiting until level 39 to evolve Growlithe, however, as this will be in time for Bryson's gym, as well as giving you the option for Flamethrower on your moveset. You'll miss out on Flare Blitz, sadly, however I think that this is worth missing out on, since you don't want to be fighting with a level 39 Growlithe against a Beartick with Brine. If you evolve Growlithe by this level, however, this fight honestly should be a breeze. You sadly lack a strong matchup against the Elite Four, and these games honestly showcase the strongest example of why you should pick the firefighting starter. If you were to choose Emboar instead, you'd have a strong matchup against Lenora's gym, as well as a way to damage Drayden and Iris sufficiently. This would also come in handy against Grimsley in the Elite Four, making these games by far the best example of why you should just go with the firefighting starters over any other fire types available. Black and White 2 has a few noticeable differences that are at least worth mentioning, however. First, you'll actually be able to catch a Growlithe in these games before Verbank, which is handy for Whirlipede if nothing else. Also, Skyla's gym actually now has a Skarmory, which actually is a battle you'll benefit from a pure fire type over something like Emboar. Sadly though, I would still recommend getting Emboar for these games over Arcanine. While it's a bit more justifiable, you still have matchups such as Iris, whose team is actually fairly weak to fighting types with Pokemon of hers such as Hydreigon, Aggron, and Lapras that Emboar would actually breeze through. Moving on to Kalos, we have Growlithe available in the post-game yet again, which means we'll calculate this run as we had it from the start. Growlithe will be a strong option against our first badge actually. Despite only having Ember for a fire attack, this should be a breeze. Although I would be careful of Surskit using Water Sport. We should be able to find a Firestone on Route 9, which is going to be perfectly timed for our next Arcanine battle being against Ramos. Ramos will peak at level 34, which is perfect due to Growlithe learning Flamethrower at this level, and even learning Extreme Speed at that level as an Arcanine. Extreme Speed, while not extremely necessary, definitely helps in case of any Pokemon living on a few HP in order to take as little damage as possible, and it will actually prove useful in a battle later on in our journey. Moving on, we also have a strong matchup against Clement, seeing as Clement has not only a Magneton, but also a Dry Skin Heliolisk. Flamethrower should destroy this battle, considering the best switch into Arcanine Clement has is an Emolga, which isn't really that strong of a Pokemon. Because Fire resists Fairy, you can actually handle Valerie's gym as well. especially because Arcanine, if nothing else, can absolutely destroy Mawile. We've already hit a record number of gyms for Arcanine to be usable during, but we'll reach our 5th gym for Arcanine by taking on Wulfric's gym, which is an ice team that has a massive Arcanine weakness. Even past ice opponents usually had something that wasn't resisted by Arcanine to damage it, such as Pryce's Piloswine or Canis's Sneasel. However, Wulfric's best way to damage Arcanine is probably Crunch from Avalugg. If these gyms weren't enough reason to use Arcanine, we have the Elite Four coming up. Malva's team is a bit tricky. However, if you have a Flash Fire Arcanine, this actually becomes easier. While Arcanine isn't the strongest Pokemon, Flash Fire plus Extreme Speed can probably at least muscle past Pyroar and Talonflame. You could also pick up the Bulldoze TM, which can be useful for Chandelure. However, Torkoal probably has enough physical defense to handle Arcanine, since it uses Earthquake in this battle. If nothing else, I'd at least utilize Arcanine against Wickstrom's team, which is actually extremely weak to Bulldoze plus Flamethrower. While you could definitely go for a fully physical Arcanine by using Fire Fang, I would actually avoid doing so since Flamethrower can avoid King Shield's attack drops. Overall, I would definitely recommend Arcanine for these games. While you don't really have strong matchups against the rivals, you'll have strong matchups against most gym leaders, as well as 2 of the Elite Four members. Moving on to Oras, we actually get into a bit of a tricky situation here. Arcanine has a much wide array of TMs to choose from in these games, which, on paper, having strong coverage options should sound really appealing on paper, right? Well, the coverage you obtain actually doesn't really help improve any matchups you'd encounter. For one, you don't really fight any prevalent fairies in this story, so you don't even have the new benefit of resisting fairy like you'd gain from Kalos. You also actually get Growlithe in these games, this time at Mount Pyre. This actually removes the potential you'd have to use Growlithe against Watson, which was easily one of your strongest matchups in these games besides Sydney. Overall, I actually would rather take Arcanine in regular Ruby and Sapphire than in the remakes, despite how many buffs Arcanine got on paper in these games. I still feel you're significantly better off choosing a Blaziken on your roster over it. And I feel like losing out on that potential battle against Watson only further secures this point for me. Going to Alola now, Growlithe is available at Route 2, in both the original games and the remakes. Growlithe has a few noteworthy opponents in these games actually, starting off with Mallow's Trial. Sadly, you'll have to battle this Totem with a Growlithe, which actually is a strong handicap due to how strong Totem Lurantis actually is with its support options. Luckily, after you beat this, you'll gain access to Diglett's Cave and can obtain a Firestone to use for Sophocles' Trial. Sadly, you'll yet again have to decide if you'd prefer a good fire attack or evolving Growlithe, which, while it's not as important against Mallow's team, is still definitely a tough call. Vikavolt and Togedemaru both become a fair amount more difficult when you're using a Growlithe as opposed to Arcanine, so this feels like you're handicapping yourself in an otherwise strong matchup. Thankfully, for most of Team Skull, you'll be able to benefit from Arcanine. However, you'll still have to deal with Guzma's Golisopod. Even if you use Arcanine, this will definitely be a pretty terrifying Pokemon to go against, seeing as it has a fair bit of natural bulk as well as Water Stab. Otherwise, Guzma should be fairly easy to handle, since he only uses Ariados and Golisopod in the first 2 battles, and in the final battle, you also fight a Pinsir and a Masquerain. You can probably handle Gladion's team very easily, especially if you choose Poplio, as his strongest counter for Arcanine on this roster is Lucario or Crobat. As for the Elite Four, this is arguably the worst Elite Four matchup for Arcanine in all of the games. Your best matchup is probably against Acerola, who even still can destroy Arcanine with Palossand. You can still take out a handful of random Pokemon here though, such as Kahili, Skarmory, or Hollis Crabominable. If you did choose Poplio, as I mentioned against Gladion, you'll also actually have a fairly decent matchup against Kukui's team. However, you'll need something for Snorlax or Lycanroc, but the rest of the team you can probably handle fairly easily with fire attacks. Going over the changes between Ultra Sun and Moon and Sun and Moon though, you actually have a few more reasons to pick up Arcanine in these games. With the Trial Captain battles, if you battle an Ultra Sun, you actually have 3 strong matchups for Arcanine if you have Flash Fire. You'll be able to beat Mallow, Sophocles, and Kiawe with the combination of Flamethrower and Bulldoze. Bulldoze is important mostly for Sophocles' Alolan Golem, as well as Kiawe's entire team, as Alolan Golem should automatically faint to a Bulldoze due to its 4x weakness, and Kiawe uses Fire Pokemon, which with Flash Fire should be able to be beaten easily. You also have a strong matchup against Mina herself, as well as her Totem battle, as long as Ribombee doesn't summon Pelipper. Finally, you'll actually have a strong matchup against another Elite Four member this time around. In the sequels, Hala is replaced by Molayne, who uses Steel types. Thankfully, the best counter to Arcanine on this roster is an Alolan Dug trio, whereas the rest of his team should be pretty easily taken care of by Flamethrower. Similarly to other Kanto games, Arcanine still definitely is fairly lackluster in these games. However, Arcanine definitely at least became more worthwhile if you really did feel like using a fire type in these games. While I genuinely feel you don't need a fire type at all in Kanto, Arcanine having a plethora of viable fire attacks in these games through early level up actually is a huge blessing. You'll have a fully viable moveset on Growlithe by the mid-20s, which is significantly better than any other past game. However, Kanto has such a limited amount of matchups you'd even want to consider a fire type. So I still think you're better off using nearly anything else. Finally, let's move on to the Galar region. In Galar, you can obtain Growlithe in Pokemon Shield on Route 3, and in Sword in the Wild area. We'll go off of Shield for this due to its earlier encounter, as well as the fact you actually have one more battle in your favor in Shield. You'll start off with a battle against Milo at the first gym, which should have Flame Wheel at this point as your fire move of choice. You can pretty easily Dynamax on the first turn and win this battle with no effort at all due to your boost from the sun you'll set yourself. You'll need to wait a bit to use Growlithe again, however, as even if you gain Flash Fire, you can't really do much against Kabu's team due to two of his Pokemon having Flash Fire, as well as your limited coverage at this point in the game. Your next strong matchup will come against Opal, which you should have an Arcanine for after finding a Firestone under Modest Oak Bridge in the wild area. Seeing as you resist Fairy, you'll be able to defensively handle this team fairly well, and just keep using Flamethrower until you win. Sadly, if you want to use Arcanine here, you'll actually also have to find a Flamethrower TR in the wild area, while you're there getting your Firestone. Otherwise, you won't actually learn it until level 40, and you'll really need this when facing your next opponent being Melanie. Melanie is a Shield exclusive gym leader, and she's the reason I chose Shield for this hypothetical. In Sword, you'd fight Gordy, who's a rock leader, whereas Melanie uses ice types. You'll actually need Arcanine to have a special fire move for this battle due to Ice-Q's Ice Face ability. This will keep a substitute against physical attacks for a single turn. However, if Hail is up, this is basically an immunity to physical moves. Because her Frostmoth lacks ice skills, you'll actually really benefit from using Flamethrower over something such as Flame Wheel or Fire Fang here. Even with your strong matchup here though, in the end, you'll be nothing to her Gigantamax Lapras. When taking on your rival, you ideally should choose Scorbunny. Arcanine will have such a difficult time against Leon anyway, so at the very least, you should be making your Hop battle as easy as possible. Hop's only strong option around Arcanine would be Snorlax, whereas you'll destroy at the very least his Corviknight and Rillaboom with this team. Against Bede, you'll probably be in a bit of a weird situation. Gardevoir, Rapidash, and Gigantamax Hatterene are all honestly very capable of beating Arcanine as a group due to how much they're able to break teams. However, you can probably at the very least beat one of them, as well as Bede's lead, which is Mawile. Lastly, you'll be able to destroy Rose's team besides Gigantamax Copperajah, which will be going for Max Quick against you. Going 4 for 5 here though, isn't that bad to be honest, so I still recommend Arcanine here, especially if you have a physical fire move. Overall though, Arcanine really isn't worth the trouble it takes to obtain in these games. I think you're much better off of Scorbunny here, especially seeing that in order to get your best matchup against Hop, you need to actually pick Scorbunny anyway as your starter. It feels dumb to actually bench that Scorbunny, seeing that Arcanine needs a Flamethrower TR to actually be useful for one of its battles, unless you wait until level 40 to evolve it. Honestly, Arcanine isn't very worthwhile in the games. While Arcanine definitely is a fine option, fire types that aren't starter Pokemon honestly struggle in a lot of games, unless you're playing X and Y, where most bosses end up losing very quickly to fire types. I honestly couldn't really recommend using Arcanine. Even in games such as Sun and Moon or Sword and Shield, where you have a handful of good matchups, Arcanine requires a Firestone to become useful. But by evolving it earlier in your journey, you miss out on extremely crucial moves. Well, that's going to do it for how strong Arcanine is in every game. Arcanine honestly just isn't worth the time, due to how you need to find a Firestone to evolve it, as well as waiting until high levels to even use the Firestone due to Arcanine not learning much upon evolving. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Be sure to comment down below what you thought, and what Pokemon you all want to see next. I'll be selecting the 3 Pokemon with the most likes and putting them head to head in a poll for the next choice. So if you want to see your favorite analyzed, make sure you're liking or commenting. Hey, welcome to my new outro. A big thank you to everyone for watching the video. I want to give a huge thanks to my phenomenal team, and for the amazing art done each week by Danny the Demon. I couldn't do all this without them. If y'all enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Be sure to leave a comment too. It really helps us out. I have a brand new TikTok for MysticUmbreon, and I've got a goal to get 10k followers over there. If we can hit that goal, I'm going to pick a random video suggested to me by you guys and do it. So go over there and leave a follow. Also, over on MysticSage, we've still got 2 videos going up every weekend. We've got content from My Hero, to Demon Slayer, to Dragon Ball, so come and check it out. And also check out MysticSage on TikTok. Finally, I've got an Amazon store where I sell tons of cool stuff. I think I'm gonna wrap this up though. I'm MysticUmbreon, and I'll see you next time with some more amazing Pokemon content.